This is Christian Gomez with the New American Magazine, and we are, again, speaking with Alex Newman, who's coming to us live from Poland at the COP24 Climate Conference. So, Alex, today is the last day of the conference, so what have been some of the highlights this weekend? Where do we go from here?
Well, thank you, Christian. Good to be with you. The highlights, man, it's really incredible to be here. You have all these, climate negotiators and dignitaries and minister of this and minister of that from all over the world, sitting here pretending like they're going to plot the future of mankind and the climate, right? If we adjust CO2 emissions this much, then we'll adjust the temperature this much, as if they had any idea. And the American media is just completely missing in action, right? Fox News, as far as I can tell, is not here. Even on the conservative side, Breitbart is not here. Even the big left-wing media, I haven't seen almost anybody here from America except that Democracy Now! And North Coast California, left-wing journal. So the media is really missing in action, and as best as I can figure, they don't want Americans to realize that right now. Their own government, right? We have a whole bunch of American climate negotiators here. I've had a chance to talk to one of them. Just heard in a press conference today after a question that I asked that they were cooperative and helpful in formulating some of this stuff. I don't think they want the American people to realize what's happening, right? You have the United Nations, a wannabe global government, putting together this massive conference to plan the future of mankind. And, it would be much more difficult if you had even 150 million Americans paying attention and saying, "Hey, what's going on there?" Right? So,
well,
for me, that's one of the big takeaways.
Well, that's exactly right, Alex. A disinformed public is much more easier to control, and it says a lot that the New American is the only major conservative media outlet from the United States that's present there. Like you mentioned, there's no Fox News, no Breitbart. Where are these purportedly conservative news outlets informing the American people of the onerous globalist regulations that are being written right now as we're both talking right now?
That's right. Yeah, they're coming up with. In fact, they're negotiating right now. The business day is over here in Poland, but the negotiators are supposedly still working. Right? They haven't presented us with a final draft of this text that they're coming up with, but they're calling this a rule book for the implementation of the Paris Agreement. Now, the Paris Agreement is this wild document that really seeks to restructure all of human civilization, right? Massive wealth redistribution. They said, to start with $100 billion per year from developed countries, which really means, Western countries and Japan, to the governments and the dictators ruling third world countries. So, this is a massive wealth transfer. And in addition to that, under the Paris Agreement, you have these drastic limitations on the so-called carbon emissions. Really, they're talking about emissions of the gas of life that developed countries are allowed to put out there. So the United States, for example, Canada, Western Europe, Japan, all these countries are supposed to radically slash their emissions of CO2. Of course, everything produces CO2. Our breathing produces CO2. Driving produces, everything produces CO2, right? Literally,
how much CO2 is being used up right now at the conference just to keep the lights on for all these UN dignitaries?
Massive amounts. They've got the heat cranked up. They flew in here on private jets, driving in on brand new, fleets of Mercedes limos, and unbelievable. In fact, their estimate was something like 10,000 U.S. homes. The amount of electricity for a year is being consumed just by this conference. That doesn't include, of course, the air travel and the transportation, the cars, all the rest of it. Massive amounts. But they're talking about rationing energy all across the developed world. And what that would do is have the effect of shutting down our productive capacity. And it's not that things will stop being produced. They'll just all be shipped over to, say, China, where they'll be under the control of the Communist Chinese Party. So then we can have an even bigger trade deficit with China, send even more of our jobs to China, borrow even more money from China. It's really hard to believe that this could be going on. But unfortunately, it's what's happening, and the media is missing in action.
So you just mentioned China. What has been China's presence at this conference that you've been attending, Alex?
I'm sorry, Christian. There was a noise here. Could you repeat?
What has been the presence of China? Have they had any sort of booths, panels, discussions, or speeches that that their delegates have made while at the conference?
Yeah, actually, there's been China has had a very, very big presence here. We just heard in a press conference that they were really helpful in helping to put together this rule book. Just before I came back up to the media room, there was a China youth delegation giving a press conference. And actually, I really wanted to go talk to them, but I figured, they got caught talking to Alex Newman from the New American, maybe saying something that veered off script, they may end up in a labor camp or worse, disappearing or falling out of a building. So I didn't want to have that on my conscience. So just let them be. But for those who don't remember, or who maybe weren't regular readers of the New American, at the Paris UN summit just a few years ago, we were there. I was there with David from Appleton. And we went to the Chinese booth and we said, hey, we would like to interview you guys about your position on this climate negotiation. And instead of actually giving us an interview, they sent one of their agents, who we saw at the booth, to spy on us and snap pictures with his little smartphone. So we turned around and there he was taking pictures of us. So that turned into kind of a big mess. We went to go file a report with the French Interior Ministry, and they said, well, that's sovereign UN territory. There's really nothing we can do. So we talked to the UN police, and they said, well, they have diplomatic immunity, so there's really nothing we can do. So, the Chinese always have a big presence here. The Communist Chinese government is really trying to portray itself as the savior of the climate and the globalist trading system. Now that the Trump administration has thrown up some questions about these things, and I think it really goes to show you the real agenda. When you have the most murderous dictatorship in all of human history helping to drive this agenda forward, and the Agenda 2032, all these delegates from all over the world, they're wearing these sustainable development logo pins on their suit lapels. And right after this came out, the Communist Chinese government used its propaganda organs, newspapers and media controlled by the Communist Chinese Party, to brag that they had played a crucial role in developing this thing. Why in the world would Western countries that are supposed to be based on freedom and liberty and free markets want to sign up to a global plan? They literally call it a master plan for humanity that was developed by a mass murdering communist dictatorship. That should tell people a lot about what is happening in these UN summits, what's happening at these negotiations. And I think it should send up, alarm bells. Why are the American media not here telling this story to the American people, who are some of the biggest financiers of this farce?
That is huge, because you often hear here in the United States the narrative that we need things like TPP or USMCA to sort of offset China. Meanwhile, where's the American media that's so concerned about China writing the rules, when right here at this UN conference where you're at, COP24, the Chinese are essentially putting out the rule book on the environment for this global wealth redistribution program that's going to lead all the wealth from the Western developed world, the United States and Europe, to go to the third world dictatorships and to go to communist China. And the media is missing in action. Well, thank you for doing an outstanding service and reporting on this. Alex, I got another question for you. Have you spoken to any other individuals of influence there while you've been there? What have been some of the highlights of some of the discussions you've had throughout this week, going around and interviewing different people there at the conference?
Yeah, well, we've had a good time. We've been able to talk to a lot of people. Once people figure out that you're not drinking the Kool-Aid, they're much less anxious to talk to you. But we were able to interview the only two elected American officials at this conference. That's what they told us, at least. It was two state senators from the state of California, both Democrats. One was, I think, Hertzberger, who represents Hollywood. And the other was, I think, Bukowski. I guess he had Polish descent. And it was an interesting conversation. You kind of have to take these interviews very delicately, because as soon as they figure out that you're not a Kool-Aid drinker, they immediately become hostile. They immediately clam up. They don't want to talk anymore. Of course, they won't. They ask you not to use the interview. And so you kind of have to pretend to, be part of this bubble here if you want to get them to say anything. So we did have some interesting conversations. I think one of them is already up. The other one should be going up very soon. So you can look forward to finding those at the New American's YouTube channel. And I encourage people to watch them. one of them, Senator Hertzberger, told, oh, yeah, I'm a globalist. And, we got to get over this whole nation state thing. I can't wait till the aliens come. And, we all get united and we can fight global warming together.
Wow.
Just, the most ridiculous things. We had, one of them talking about how electric cars are going to save us, because he represents the district where Tesla is located. And of course, I really wish I could have asked him this question, but once you start asking real questions, they refuse to talk to you. But
exactly,
real Americans have to produce real wealth to continue subsidizing Tesla, right? This is a welfare queen of a company. It's consuming billions of dollars of our taxes. And the notion that we can just all, live on all subsidized things is ludicrous. Somebody has to produce wealth so that it can be redistributed in the form of subsidies to green cars or windmills or whatever goofy thing that the politicians want to spend money on. And they never want to talk about that. They just come here and instead they promote their political agenda. And there really is this sense among these people here. Everybody wants to show how important they are and how great they are. And they all act like, and I'm sure some of them really believe, that they are saving the world. It's it's truly a bizarre spectacle. It's like surreal. I wish I could get regular Americans, everyday Americans who don't have an opportunity to come here to these conferences, just give them a chance to feel what this is like. It's so bizarre. And unfortunately, our taxes are funding all this. And unless and until the American people say enough is enough of this scam, this stuff is going to continue, whether Trump is the president or anybody else.
Well, Alex, you are right by the signpost where it says that up ahead you're in the twilight zone right now. So, Alex, regarding sort of the subsidies you were mentioning for companies like Tesla, basically, and taxes that would have to be raised to sort of save the world, like a lot of these liberals and globalists are talking about what they want to do. Has there been any reaction at the conference to the protests in France in response to the taxes that have been raised on the French people with regards to pumping petroleum and gasoline into their vehicles in response to the environment? Has there been any response to that at the conference?
Yeah, along with the existence of President Trump and his message that man-made global warming hypothesis is bunk, these protests in France have kind of hung over this whole summit like a dark cloud, right? Everybody's in a bad mood. The French environment minister was just here this week saying, oh, yeah, we recognize that we made some mistakes, but everything should go on as usual, right? Don't let these protests and this uprising deter anyone from having lots of ambition when it comes to severely restricting energy choices and jacking up taxes massively on energy consumption. And they must have some masterful PR experts. You got to give them that at least. They are very, very good when it comes to public relations and putting a spin on things. So I actually had an opportunity about an hour ago to ask a question at a huge press conference. There was probably several hundred journalists from all over the world, some of them representing mainstream media in other countries, along with a lot of politicians and delegates and others. And I said, you have to phrase it like you're drinking the Kool-Aid. Otherwise, oh, you're a denier. Get out of here. You get a mob whipped up. But so, there's these huge protests in France going on. The Paris Agreement was negotiated there. And these protests are widely being seen as a repudiation of the French government's efforts to live up to the commitments that it made under the UN Paris Agreement. Has this had any effect on the negotiations? Has this kind of reduced the ambition level of governments when it comes to imposing more totalitarianism on their populations and accelerating this process of reducing prosperity, reducing the standard of living of people around the world, reducing people's energy choices and ability to feed themselves and keep their homes? The answer was what you would expect from people with a lot of training and a lot of resources to hire armies of PR experts. The answer was, the reason why we had this is because the French government didn't take into consideration that we need to have a just transition to this carbon-free economy.
So it has to be gradual. You have to have the frog in the boiling pot just slowly.
Exactly, and they want to use it as an excuse for even bigger government. So they said, we'll take more money in taxes from those who can pay it. We'll give it in subsidies to those who can't, so that they can, maybe not die of starvation just yet. That way they can be brought along with this too. Who doesn't want free money, right? And so that's the spin here. Is if we just have bigger government, if we just get more people dependent on welfare and more people dependent on the government to be able to heat their homes and drive their cars and all the rest of it, then these lower class people will be willing to jump on the bandwagon, and we can march forward with our agenda. So that's the official line here when it comes to the protests in France. Yeah, I'm not sure these people really believe that themselves, but they did need to come up with some kind of excuse because this is the massive elephant in the room that nobody really wants to talk about. So.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see what comes out of the conference in terms of an actual rule book or a new document that the UN puts together from this conference. And what will be even more interesting will be to see the commitment level of the various governments involved and how they are willing or not willing to implement what the UN recommends from this conference. Any thoughts on that, Alex?
Yeah. Well, I think we can almost be guaranteed that they're going to be coming up with a document that furthers the redistribution of wealth, furthers the restriction on Americans' energy choices and the energy choices of people all over the world. We've been told repeatedly that the U.S. negotiators are just negotiating as if President Trump wasn't really the president, right? They keep saying, well, we're protecting U.S. interests. That's why we're here. That's why we're doing all this. And, that sounds like a bunch of baloney to me. I don't understand what U.S. interest is served by participating in this hoax. But, we can be almost sure of that. And now I think they're working out, or at least they say they're working out the final details on the loss and damage, right? Where every time a hurricane hits or a wildfire strikes, they're going to say, well, that's the fault of those Americans because, they developed, and that's the fault of those Europeans and those Japanese because, they had electricity before we did. And so now they need to pay us reparations for, that hurricane or a tornado or a flood or whatever it is. So, there's very, very dangerous things being talked about here. They're literally creating the shackles that they intend to use to chain humanity to this climate regime that they've been working on. This is the 24th year that they've been doing these ridiculous conferences. And they're making progress, right? They've caused trillions of dollars to be spent already, to be misallocated, to be squandered on more regulations, on wasting our labor, on investing in all kinds of ridiculous things that nobody ever would have invested in were it not for this ludicrous process. So think about, when you realize that there are children going to bed hungry tonight, when you realize that there are people who don't have homes or people who are burning dung to heat their dinner, and then you realize that trillions of dollars are being squandered by these people on this ludicrous conference. It's hard not to get mad. And, unfortunately,
it's pretty heartbreaking.
There's very few people here who see that. It is. It really is. And it's up to the American people, I think, to put a stop to this fraud.
Well, thank you, Alex. That's all the time we have today. And again, Alex Newman coming to us live directly from the madhouse that is the COP24 conference, United Nations climate conference there in Poland. Well, Alex, you take care. Stay warm. We know it's wintry conditions over there with the snowfalls and everything. So you stay safe over there. God bless you and take care, Alex.
Thank you so much, Christian. God bless you guys.